Why do you feel hollow the moment it ends? You thought this was the climax, the conquest, the reward. But now, the silence screams louder than the moans that came before it. Every man has felt it. That strange void after the orgasm. The moment you're supposed to feel like a king, but instead, you feel like a ghost. You're not satisfied. You're severed. It's like something was taken from you. And the worst part, you can't name what it was. This isn't about sex. This is about something deeper than biology. This is about illusion. The illusion that pleasure will heal you. Sigmund Freud once warned, "What we call happiness in the strictest sense comes from the sudden satisfaction of needs, and by its very nature can only be transitory." Translation? The pleasure you're chasing is a mirage. It shows up bright, seductive, intoxicating. But the closer you get, the more it disappears into sand. And here's the part no one tells you. That emptiness you feel, it was always there. Sex didn't create it. It just exposed it. Freud understood that eros, the life drive, the pleasure drive, wasn't just about union or reproduction. It was a coping mechanism, a distraction. We chase sex not because we're full of desire, but because we're starving for meaning. And so the modern man has made the same trade again and again. Truth for comfort, direction for dopamine, selfhood for seduction. You scroll, you match, you chase, you climax. And then you sit there, staring at the ceiling, wondering why it still feels like something's missing. This isn't just your story. It's a crisis of masculine identity. We were sold the idea that conquest would fulfill us, that the more women we have, the more man we become. But the truth? Each conquest without purpose cuts us deeper. Each climax without connection carves more of the soul away. So let's get honest. The woman you slept with, she's not the problem. The problem is what you expected her to fix. Because somewhere in the dark corners of the male psyche, we've confused release with redemption. And that mistake is costing us our strength, our self-respect, and our sovereignty. This video isn't about blaming women. It's not about shame. It's not even about sex. It's about waking up from a lie. It's about turning the lights on in a room you've tried to keep locked. What if your pursuit of pleasure isn't about life, but about death? It sounds absurd at first, but Sigmund Freud didn't think so. In 1920, he introduced a theory so disturbing that even his followers struggled to accept it. He called it the death drive, thanatos, a force deep within the psyche that seeks not survival, but obliteration. You've heard of eros, Freud's name for the life force. It's the drive to connect, to create, to love, to build. But what if that force has a darker twin? What if beneath the hunger for pleasure lies a quiet longing to disappear? According to Freud, we aren't just creatures of desire. We are creatures of conflict. Two forces battle within us, one pulling toward life, the other toward self-destruction. And nowhere is that more obvious than in sex. Think about it. The orgasm is often called the little death, la petite mort, and not just by poets. It's a moment of complete surrender, a loss of control, a moment where the self dissolves. Some men chase it compulsively, as if it were a drug, because for a fleeting second, they get relief. Not satisfaction, relief. Relief from their minds. Relief from their emptiness. Relief from themselves. But what comes next? The collapse. The drop. The post-nut clarity that doesn't clarify, it condemns. That feeling of being used, even when you were the one who initiated it. That sense that you gave something away, you'll never get back. That realization that what you just did didn't bring you closer to anything. It pulled you further away from yourself. Freud believed that modern man was deceived into believing that sexual release was healing. But in truth, when sex is disconnected from meaning, it becomes a ritual of self-erasure. Let's be clear. This isn't about morality. This is about psychic fragmentation. About the man who uses women as mirrors and ends up seeing only a fading reflection. Carl Jung would later build on this, exploring the idea of projection and how men unconsciously place their soul, their longing, their hope onto women. But before projection, there's impulse. And Freud warned us, when we mistake the death drive for desire, we mistake escape for intimacy. And here's the most dangerous part. The more disconnected the sex, the stronger the death drive becomes. Because the body learns that self-abandonment brings relief. That losing yourself momentarily is preferable to confronting your pain permanently. So you repeat the cycle: hookup, orgasm, collapse, scroll, match, repeat, and every time, the emptiness grows louder. The death drive doesn't always wear black. Sometimes it smiles, sometimes it moans. Sometimes it wears lingerie and whispers validation in your ear. But its goal is always the same: annihilation. Every man remembers his first time, not always in detail, not always as a moment of pleasure, but as a psychic rupture, a gateway. Something entered you, not just someone, a belief, a pattern, a wound. Freud called this repetition compulsion, the haunting tendency to unconsciously repeat early emotional experiences, especially unresolved ones, especially those tied to love, loss, shame, and sex. Your first time wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. It whispered to your nervous system, this is what connection feels like. This is what love costs. This is what you must become to be chosen. Maybe you felt powerful. Maybe you felt used. Maybe you felt nothing. That numbness is the real ghost. It wasn't the orgasm that marked you. It was the context, the meaning, or worse, the lack of it. And here's what most men never understand. The body remembers what the mind cannot speak. You may not recall the details, but your nervous system does. It recreates them in every future partner. Every meaningless hookup. Every silent moment after release. Every emotional void dressed up as pleasure. So you keep chasing, not women, not sex, but a memory you can't name. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You think your type is a preference. It's not. It's a pattern. You keep attracting mirrors of your first impact. And worse, you keep abandoning yourself in the exact same way you did back then. Men aren't addicted to sex. They're addicted to what they felt they almost received, but didn't. The warmth they couldn't hold. The approval that slipped away. The feeling of being enough for once, even if just for a moment. But here's the poison. If your nervous system associates sex with shame, abandonment, or emptiness, then every orgasm becomes a re-wounding. And that's why the emptiness grows. Because your soul isn't being fed, your shadow is. There was a time when sex was sacred, not because it was pure, but because it was dangerous. It had power. It could create life. It could create obsession. It could create madness. And because of this, ancient cultures placed sex within ritual, myth, and meaning. There were gods for it: Aphrodite, Ishtar, Shiva. There were temples, initiations, warnings. Sex was seen as a force, not a product. A mystery, not a commodity. But something changed. Sex didn't lose its power. It lost its soul. Modernity did something no ancient priest would dare. It disenchanted sex, stripped it of mystery, then resold it as liberation. From magazines to movies, from OnlyFans to algorithm-fed fantasies, sex became a currency, and man became the desperate consumer. But here's the lie. What culture calls liberation is often enslavement. You were told, sleep with more women and you'll be a man. Be wanted and you'll feel whole. Sex equals power. But how powerful do you feel after? Empty, drained, disconnected. Why? Because what's being sold as pleasure is often dissociation. It's not sex you're addicted to. It's escape. Escape from responsibility. Escape from pain. Escape from the mirror of your own soul. Freud called it the pleasure principle, the drive to seek gratification and avoid pain. But he also warned of its shadow. When pleasure becomes compulsive, it no longer serves life. It serves death. It becomes the death drive in disguise. Pleasure that ends in numbness. Pursuit that ends in emptiness. Every pop song, every hero in a film, every billboard, every commercial, every dopamine-laced app. Sex is everywhere, but meaning is nowhere. That's not coincidence. It's architecture. If man is reduced to appetite, he's easier to control, easier to sell to, easier to keep docile. That's the sacred lie. The freedom to pursue sex without purpose isn't freedom, it's a leash. And here's the deeper tragedy. When you make sex your god, you become the sacrifice. Your time, your focus, your mission, your soul, all burned at the altar of a promise that never fulfills. And the woman, she becomes the priestess of this false religion, not because she is malicious, but because she has been conditioned to play the role just as much as you. You are not lovers. You are actors in a script neither of you wrote. You've just climaxed. The room is silent. The heat has faded. And suddenly, so has everything else. What felt like connection now feels like distance. What felt like power now feels like loss. And in that strange, unsettling quiet, you feel hollow. Why? Not because of guilt, not even because of shame, but because the act that was supposed to complete you revealed how incomplete you really are. This is the part no one teaches you. Sex doesn't fill the void. It exposes it. It's spiritual. It's existential. It's the ache behind the action, the silence beneath the scream. Carl Jung once said, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life." So what does modern man do? He fills it with women, with lust, with stimulation. Because confronting the void would mean confronting himself, his direction, his wounds, his lies. Freud called this the narcissistic wound, the pain of realizing you're not the center of the universe, and that no woman can orbit around your emptiness and make it whole. You were taught to chase pleasure, but you were never taught to carry purpose. So you collapse into her, not out of love, but out of need. Need to feel chosen. Need to feel seen. Need to silence the question, am I enough without her? But here's the truth you must face. Every time you use sex to escape the void, you deepen it, so the cycle begins again. More women, more scrolling, more chasing. And each time, the high is shorter. The crash is heavier. The void is louder. You told yourself it would be different this time. Maybe she was new. Maybe the connection felt deeper. Maybe, for just a moment, you believed this would quiet the ache inside you. But when the moans fade and the silence returns, it hits you again. That haunting, familiar hollowness. Only this time, it's heavier. Because now it's not just emptiness. It's regret. It's confusion. It's shame. Welcome to the cycle. A loop so many men are trapped in, and almost none understand. Freud once observed that repetition compulsion is the psyche's way of reenacting unresolved pain, not to fix it, but because it's the only pattern we know. The real issue isn't her, and it's not the act, it's that you're asking something spiritual to fix something existential. You've turned sex into therapy, and now you're addicted to your own disappointment. You see, the shame cycle begins with a fantasy. You imagine she'll make you feel whole, that her body will validate yours, that her presence will dissolve your loneliness. But she can't, because she's not a healer. She's not a priestess. She's just a person, and you made her a god. So the cycle goes. Desire, pursuit, climax, emptiness, shame, repeat. So what began as liberation becomes entrapment. You're not a free man. You're a conditioned animal, pulled by urges you never chose, and punished by emotions you don't understand. And then comes the worst part. You tell yourself it's just how it is, that this is what men do, that you'll grow out of it, that the right woman will fix it. But all that is noise. The real signal. Your shame is a signal, not a sentence. It's not telling you to hate yourself. It's telling you to wake up. The shame isn't weakness. It's wisdom in disguise. It's your soul whispering, you weren't made for this. You were made for standards, for direction, for dominion over your instincts, not slavery to them. So the question is simple. How many more times will you repeat the same mistake and call it experience? The next time will feel worse. Not because she's worse, but because you knew better and still handed over your sovereignty. You thought you were chasing her. Her body, her warmth, her approval, her curves, her breath, her yes. But it wasn't her. Not really. What you were chasing was the part of you that went missing. The moment you tied your identity to a glance. The moment you believed a woman could validate your masculinity. The moment the ache inside became louder than your voice. You thought the emptiness came after sex. But no. The emptiness was already there. Sex just exposed it. You weren't hungry for her. You were hungry for presence, for meaning, for the man you left behind when you made pleasure your god. But that's not the end of your story. The moment you stop needing her to complete you, you begin the long walk home. The man who reclaims his hunger. The man who doesn't numb it with porn, or silence it with casual sex, or outsource it to fantasies of being chosen. That man, he's unstoppable. He doesn't beg. He builds. He doesn't plead. He penetrates the world with purpose. He doesn't chase. He creates gravity and lets the worthy come to him. That man knows something sacred, that the deepest craving he ever felt was for his own soul. And once he tastes that, no woman, no image, no false intimacy will ever control him again. So let this be your wake-up call. Stop making her the story. You are the story. The world doesn't need more men chasing shadows. It needs men who've come face to face with themselves and didn't look away. If that's you, subscribe. It's time to feed the man within.